guys, these days two things are in trend. The first thing is to talk about masks and the second thing is to talk about the future of work. So since I've already spoken about masks, let me do the honors and talk about the second cool thing these days, talk about the future of work. Now, India's GDP is divided into three major segments. Most of it, around 60%, comes from services. Around 20-25% comes from manufacturing and the remaining is from agriculture. Considering that agriculture and manufacturing cannot primarily be done remotely, these need to be done on premise most of the times, and most of these times these are very spread across the country. They're not in one particular location, and hence people probably hire locals, and so on premise work is probably more realistic to these particular situations, and probably this will remain for a long period of time. Now, talking about services, a lot of services these days probably can be done online because of intervention of digital technology and the way companies are investing in going global. At the end of the day, probably a good portion of services can be done remotely, and that is what we're observing in COVID era, where a lot of companies are doing work from home. A lot of people are working remotely from their hometowns, from their small cities, and hence being able to deliver the services that they would have otherwise delivered being in an office in a centralized location. In India, most of the service industry is concentrated in cities, and the bigger the city, the better the availability of jobs in the service sector. Now let's talk about cities and the type of people present and the type of potential employees a service industry company can expect. The first set of employees they can expect are people who are born in cities and are based in cities. So these are either third generation, fourth generation migrants who were born in the city and raised in the city and probably have their own accommodation and their own house in the city. So this is the first set of employees a company can expect. The second set of employees are people who are not born in that particular city. They could be born elsewhere, in a village, in a town, or in a smaller city, and they migrate to this big city in anticipation of finding better employment opportunities. And this is one mega trend that has been observed in the last decade, where rising urbanization was a big challenge because it puts a strain on resources. It has a lot of impacts. Let's not talk about that. The third set of people that companies can expect are people who will stay back in their original hometown no matter what the circumstance. Could be n number of reasons, but they essentially are out of reach for the companies that want their employees to be based in the city. So now we see that a lot of people migrating from towns and smaller villages, their second generation would be born in and based in the city, and so we need a good flow of people migrating from towns to cities so that we have more people being born and based in cities in the future generations. And so this trend of rapid urbanization definitely takes place, and we are noticing the impacts of that. Let us talk about that and how that relates to remote work and possibly my recommendations for that. So firstly, when people move to cities, they definitely need more housing. I'm talking about category 2, where people are not born and based in the city. They've come to the city in the hope of finding employment, and so they need housing. There could be two types of housing people need. One is rental housing and the other one is own house. What happens is people definitely prefer to stay in a locality that gives them holistic solutions. So it needs a school, it needs a hospital, it needs a park, it needs a good community hall, it needs your religious facilities, etc. Right? So the demand for a particular type of housing is definitely going to increase, considering that as more and more people move to cities, the demand for this type of holistic housing will increase. And what would that lead to? Because the city has some limits. Some cities are expanding their limits, so there are satellite towns that are forming around cities, and so people end up moving to the outskirts so that they are in the city premises but far off. But then there are a lot of people who do not like to also move to outskirts for n number of reasons, and so that still keeps the demand for within city housing high. So what does that do? It increases the prices of the houses in the city. And so people need more money to buy the same house. Similarly, it just doesn't increase the price like that. It also increases the demand for smaller houses because more people cannot afford bigger houses at a higher price. So this drives a lot of trends that you probably have seen in the past 10 years. The first thing is that when you have a smaller house, you definitely need to have a nuclear family. You cannot have 10 people living in a very small house because then it will become too cramped and it will lead to a lot of issues, right? So you have smaller families living in smaller houses, and the demand for smaller houses increases, and so because the demand increases, the price for these houses increases, and if the price has increased, obviously people move to outskirts, or people need more money. And a lot of people also cannot stay in smaller houses or cannot move to outskirts, so they send their families away. They put their families in their native place or in their native village, and they themselves, the person who is working, lives in the city. And this leads to a lot of problems. There are situations where there are spouses, two people working, and one person lives in one city and another person lives in another city, and this leads to other sort of requirements that people in cities have. The first requirement is that when you have a smaller family, and when you have a nuclear family, or when you have your spouse away or your family away, you definitely need help with your daily chores, and so you end up hiring outside help for your regular work, right? And so if you hire an outside help for your work, if you're having two family setups in two different places, or if you're living in the center of the city, at the end of the day you need more money. So what do people do? They need to earn more money, so they feel that they need to study more and improve their qualification to earn more money, so that they can lead a better life, they can bring their family back into the city, right? So when they study more, they realize that they've paid a lot of fee, and so they need more money to be able to pay the fee they have paid to study more. And in today's times, you will see that a lot of degrees have become so commoditized that you will see people with 10-20 certifications available without jobs in the market. So certification and qualification has also become very commoditized and very expensive. So when people study more, pay more, they need more money, so they end up working harder in order to earn more money. They expect more growth, they expect better raises, they expect promotions, and a lot of things. And when they don't get that, they go for a job shift, because you will find a lot of documents on internet saying that the best way to increase your salary immediately is to go for a job shift. And what does that do? If you have a job shift, obviously you need to prove yourself in the new job, so you work even harder to prove yourself. And what does that do? That makes you have zero time for your family, because you're always busy at work. It makes you have zero time for yourself, right? Now let's talk about another track of discussion. When you move to outskirts, you definitely need to move to office, because you have a longer distance to travel. So either you take public transportation or you take private transportation. When you take road transportation, you are sick of the traffic, and so you start early, right? When you start early and you go to office and you want to work harder, you want to avoid peak hours, that's why you actually started early. So you leave early or you leave late. When you leave early, you feel that you do not have enough importance in the office, and so you end up feeling irritated, you end up feeling demotivated, you end up feeling less valued, and probably you go for a job shift. Or if you feel that even if I come early, I will stay back and I will show that I'm a very hardworking person. It's a culture issue also in India, that the longer you are in office, the more hardworking and the more productive you are. This is the perception in most companies. I'm not generalizing, but you would see this happening in a lot of places. So you end up working harder, and then of course you have no time for family or yourself. When you take private transportation or when you take public transportation, the mere fact that there is a rapid influx of people in the city definitely increases the traffic that you will face in your locality. And the fact that people are just moving from one corner of the city to another corner just to reach office also increases traffic. Suppose you were all located in your small clusters where this is your office and this is where you're living, you wouldn't travel all around these places, right? But when you're living in this corner and you have your office in that corner, you definitely are going like this, and at the end of the day you are increasing the traffic. And because of the traffic, a lot of people stay stationary in the traffic. If you're traveling for 2 hours, 1.5 hours is spent in stationary traffic, and half an hour is actually where you actually travel. And what does that do? That increases the emissions that you're all leading to, right? Sorry, I forgot to mention this transport bit. Now, if you increase the emissions, you have more and more pollution in the denser parts of the city. So what do? You again move outskirts, and because you moved outskirts, you want transport, and because of transport, there's traffic. Because of traffic, there's emissions. Because of emissions, you want to move outskirts. Now, this is another cycle of thought. Now, let's come to Again, the fact that you moved outskirts, the fact that you started early and you want to work harder, and so you have no time for family and no time for yourself. When you come home, either people are already done with their day, and they are asleep, your children are sleeping, probably your wife is sleeping or your husband is sleeping, and so you are left alone to talk to yourself and to probably de-stress yourself, so end up being lonely. Many people go into the digital world and start watching videos or start talking to people on video chat, and that increases the electricity consumption due to charging of our mobiles, charging of our iPads and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, because of our loneliness, again, we want to be just cut off from the world and spend time without human interaction, so that we are just at peace and we are able to de-stress. Now, is this all good? In COVID times, you have seen that when people had the opportunity to work from home, they did not have this entire travel hassle. They were all staying together in one location because they could all pool resources, and you can definitely see that employees were more productive. And I think that on a longer term, the companies and the industries that can allow remote work should actually consider that option, because it has a lot of benefits, not just for employees, but for the companies and for the society as well. Here are my thoughts on this. The first thing is that if you understood what I've tried to say here, the first point is that employees will definitely be happier if they are allowed to remotely work, allowed to work from home, because they have a better support system because of pooling of resources. They need lesser money because they can go and live in low cost localities. They can live in their village, they can live in a very far off island, but be online. That means that the demand for housing in bigger cities will reduce. There will be bigger houses for same price, and so there will be people who will have lifestyle benefits even in the big city, because at the end of the day, if you have a bigger house, you have more space to walk around, to do your stuff, and definitely have a healthier and a more fulfilled life. If you have more time for yourself because you're saving time in transportation, you definitely can invest that in building your health, in building your network, in building your skills, etc. So at the end of the day, remote work will definitely have a lot of positive benefits for employees. Of course, employees have to upskill themselves in remote work. They have to be more proactive in reaching out to their colleagues. They have to be more proactive and more willing to collaborate and help their colleagues. Things that could be very easily done when people are all physically located, like hearing a colleague's problem and offering help, will have to be done intentionally, and people will have to put extra effort to accomplish all those, but under the promise that employees want to become more responsible, more accountable. Definitely remote work is going to help employees. But the other benefits that I'm going to talk about are the benefits for companies. When employees are happier, when they are more motivated, they are more productive, and you will have lesser attrition, because they do not feel the need to shift jobs just to get more money, because they are happy with the amount of money they are making, because they can save more, because they don't have this pressure of living the same lifestyle with a higher amount of money. And so when companies have lesser attrition, obviously they have lesser attrition, hiring costs, they have access to a bigger talent pool, because now they are not limited to the set of people who are either born and based in the city, or either those ones that are willing to migrate. They can expand their talent pool to this third category, the people who wish to stay back in their villages, and so they will have higher talent availability, which means that the cost of talent for them would be lower. If you have more supply, obviously you can pay lesser, right? And so the overall cost of the company would definitely reduce in terms of the amount of money they need to pay for real estate, the amount of money they need to invest in having a space in a bigger city. So remote working wherever possible, where employees are willing to take accountability for their actions, definitely helps companies. And then it also has a larger benefit on the society, where if you have happier employees and if you have more profitable companies, the society is a much happier place, because people are in the location they are in, they have their family support, they don't have to struggle harder to belong to a new community in a bigger city. They are closer to their friends, they have more time for their family, themselves, they are healthier people, and so the society will benefit much more from this type of a human behavior. And then definitely, because people are traveling lesser, there would be lesser pollution, there wouldn't be a lot of resource constraint on bigger cities. And this is another mega trend that's been talked about a lot, because of rapid urbanization, we have a lot of constraint on the limited resources in cities. So we will see cities having water scarcity, some cities having floods, because we are closing the lakes and ponds, because we need more money for more land for more housing. At the end of the day, we will not be competing for the same resources in a concentrated piece of land. We will all be spread across. We will all spend our local resources and put lesser strain per person on resources in a particular location. And so at the end of the day, for this particular reason, that we will access resources across the country, we will lead to the development of the society across the country. The development per se will not be specifically concentrated to the big cities. It will be spread across different villages and towns within the country. And when you have a happier society, it will give you happier employees, who will in turn make companies happier. So you can see that this entire chain can be achieved by breaking this older chain of having to be concentrated in a particular location to achieve a particular outcome. And if COVID has taught us one thing, that this can be achieved with some more effort from the employees, from the companies, and from the society. So maybe this is a chance to take this cue and start moving towards remote work, so that we have happier employees, happier companies, and a happier society, and we are able to live more happier lives.